Biden in March 2022, he said sending tanks to Ukraine means World War III. Why they changed their mind on this issue? And do you think is it going to change anything on the battleground?
In March 2022, the United States was convinced that Russia was going to win the conflict decisively. And there was then therefore a need to be resisting of any requests for heavy military equipment because the United States believed that that would eventually compel NATO to get involved, and that would be a direct conflict with Russia, and that would be World War III. But when it became clear that Russia wasn't invading using hard methods, the special military operation was very soft, comparatively so. The United States and others misinterpreted this as a sign of weakness on the part of Russia. And they began the process of interfering with peace talks. And we saw that with Boris Johnson on April 1st, stopping the Istanbul peace negotiations. And they began providing billions of dollars worth of military assistance to Ukraine in an effort to assist them in the defeat of the Russians. But even then, the concern was not to escalate unnecessarily and thereby force Russia into a counter-escalation. The belief was simply by providing this training, this artillery, and some old Soviet-era equipment that the Ukrainian military would be able to push the Russians back. And indeed, the victories in Kharkov and on the right bank of Kherson seemed to prove them correct. But it was an absolute misreading of the situation. The Russians not only stopped the Ukrainian counteroffensive, but went, mobilized, and they're in the process now of building up a powerful military capability for which Ukraine has no answer to, literally no answer. The United States and NATO having committed to a course of action which was contingent upon the supply of sufficient military equipment to the Ukrainian military so they could accomplish the task. We're now faced with an impossible problem. How do you continue to send equipment to the Ukrainian military knowing there is no way they can win? I mean, just take a look at everything that's coming out right now. Everybody is acknowledging Ukraine's lost. There's nothing that can be done. For political reasons, the United States has to be seen as doing everything possible to allow Ukraine a chance to win because they know Ukraine's going to lose. Biden knows that his administration is going to have to answer very difficult questions about how did Russia win this war? And they want to make sure that when that time comes, they can say, we did everything. We gave Ukraine everything they asked for, including tanks, even though back in March he said it meant World War III. Under normal circumstances, it could have meant World War III, but see, the circumstances have changed between March and today. Back in March, the United States, was transitioning into the mode that Russia was weak. Russia couldn't win the war. Today, we know that Russia is strong and that Russia will win the war. Two totally different mindsets. Back then, we provided weaponry, genuinely believing that this would help Ukraine defeat Russia. Today, we know Ukraine can't defeat Russia, but we have to go through the political motions of being seen as assisting. And this is actually not just a tragedy, but it's a condemnation of the United States, because what we're saying is, in order to look good politically, we're going to sacrifice tens of thousands of Ukrainian lives. That's despicable.
And as you said, it's really tragic because the state is destroyed, society is destroyed. And I don't know before that 10 millions of Ukrainians have immigrated to the West, some 2 million to Russia. Birth rate of Ukraine is the lowest in the Europe. It's the lowest, 1.22, something like that. And these people under Zelensky, there are something like roughly 20 millions, 20 million people. It's so amazing that why they are continuing sending weapons and weapons and weapons and billions of money of dollar to Ukraine, but it doesn't help ordinary Ukrainians.
Well, it's even worse than that. We sent it knowing that Ukraine is the most corrupt nation on the planet, and we sent it knowing that this corrupt nation was stealing this money blind. We sent it knowing that 7 out of 10, every $10 we sent ended up in the pockets of Ukrainian politicians and corrupt officials. We did this knowing that we were wasting U.S. taxpayer money. We refused to allow an inspector general to be installed to oversee the accounting of this money. We didn't want to ask how it was being spent because we knew how it was being spent. We knew the corruption that was going on. This was always a political game designed to create the perception of a powerful Ukraine, knowing all along that Ukraine could never win this war. I mean, that's the disgusting part of this. We have been literally funding corruption. And now, you know, I love the hypocrisy of the United States. Now, the Pentagon and the State Department are approaching the Ukraine saying, you must account for every single dollar. Well, that's because we have a Republican Congress right now who's saying we need to account for every single dollar before we send more. And the reality is Ukrainians can't account for it because 70% of it just disappeared, was stolen. I mean, Zelensky might be able to account for the money that he personally stole, but all the other people, they're not going to admit to it. So this is the United States has knowingly facilitated the destruction of Ukraine as a modern nation state. I mean, yes, it's Zelensky's fault. Yes, it's his government's fault. Yes, Europe is complicit in this crime. But America is the one that made this war possible. We're the one that not only created the policies that led to this war, but we're the ones that led the world in sustaining this conflict, knowing all along we would never be there for the Ukrainian people. Never be there for the Ukrainian people. This should be a lesson to everybody in the world. In fact, I'm just going to make it clear. Hey, out there in the world, wake up. America's not your friend. America will never be your friend. America will always abandon you. America will always bleed you dry. America will always cause your men to die. America will always cause your women and children to flee and become refugees. America doesn't care about you at all. America will never care about you at all. You exist to serve America. America will never serve you. We are the colonial masters. You are the colonial servants, and never forget your place.
Scott, did you have the opportunity to see that documentary that I sent you the link? I sent you the link of it, a new documentary about Putin.
No, I'm familiar with it, and I haven't seen it. I apologize. As you know, my life has been a little bit crazy in the last couple of days, so I haven't had a chance just to unplug and look. But I promise to do that, and after I do, we'll come back and talk about it.
Yeah, but we can talk about it because in this documentary they're picturing Putin as a KGB agent. It's saying at the start point of this documentary they say Putin was a KGB agent. It wants to picture Putin as somebody heartless, somebody that doesn't understand anything. But nobody says, yes, United States, George H.W. Bush was a CIA agent, was a director of CIA. Why nobody says this? You can't find anywhere he accusing him of being a CIA agent. Why they're pushing this rhetoric toward Putin?
Because they're ignorant. Because Vladimir Putin is extraordinarily complex individual. He is somebody that if you told the truth about him, people would find him attractive as a leader. He's very honest. He's incorruptible. He is smarter than anybody else in the room. He is articulate. He's compassionate. He cares about his people. I mean, for the Americans, that's the biggest sin of it all. He cares about the Russian people. You see, we want a leader like Boris Yeltsin, who is weak, easily corrupted, easily pressured into doing things, who engaged in policies that benefited the United States and the West, but were destructive to the Russian people. That's the kind of Russian leader we want. And so we are deeply resentful that Vladimir Putin came to power and has stayed in power despite everything we've tried to do to get rid of him. In fact, the longer he survives, the angrier we get. The more he is president, the more compassion and his vision of humanity, peaceful coexistence, prevalent this message is on the world stage, and the more we must suppress it. And the way you suppress it is by attacking the man, attacking his character, creating an artificial picture. And that was the purpose of this documentary. This documentary wasn't designed to tell the truth about Putin or even educate people about the reality of Putin. This documentary was designed to reinforce a mindset existing in the West that this man that the rest of the world recognizes as a noble leader is not. Don't believe the hype we're saying. He's really an evil KGB agent. And the people watching this documentary was built for the ignorant, for the fearful. This documentary is designed to be watched by people so they become afraid, and it reinforces all the prejudices that are already put in their minds, reinforces the Russophobia that exists so that they yet again believe at face value anything negative said about Vladimir Putin. And nope, don't be distracted by the fact that every time he gives a speech, it's actually a pretty good speech and the words make sense. No, don't be distracted by the fact that the man cries when people suffer. Don't be distracted by the fact that he has a heart, that he has humanity. Don't be distracted by reality. Focus solely on the fiction. And that's what this documentary is, 100% fiction. Yeah, he was a KGB agent. You know, I was a Marine Corps intelligence officer. Did that for 12 years. Did it shape my life? You're damn right it did. I'm proud of every second I spent as a Marine. But one, just because I was a Marine Corps intelligence officer doesn't mean I'm an evil person. Just because Vladimir Putin was a KGB officer doesn't mean he was an evil person. Being in the KGB does not mean you're evil. It means you're doing a job. It means you're serving your country. Being in the Marine Corps doesn't make me evil. It means I was doing a job. I was serving my country. It's about the man, not the title. And the man, Vladimir Putin, is a very impressive individual who is carrying on his shoulders burdens that no Western leader in modern time have been called upon to carry. In fact, these burdens are so heavy that it would cause any Western leader in power today to collapse almost immediately. Who we have in the way, Joe Biden, literally one of the most narcissistic, mentally inept individuals in the history of the United States. And we've known this about Joe since he was first a senator. He gabs. He's a liar. He's a plagiarist. And he makes no sense. But he's the man who turned Delaware into a tax haven. And as a result, he's untouchable in Delaware, was able to be a senator forever because Delaware played a role in empowering the economic elite in America. He became, put up into prominent positions. He's not smart. Listen to anything he said. He's been wrong every single time he opens his mouth, but the Democrats don't care, and they made him president. He would collapse under the pressures that Putin is under. Emmanuel Macron, come on. I can't think of a weaker leader, except maybe Joe Biden. Olaf Scholz, we can't even call him a leader. He's just the Pillsbury Doughboy. He is literally the softest individual ever to hold power in Europe in a long time. I mean, the female who just became prime minister of Italy. Oh, geez, I forget her name.
I don't remember her name.
Yeah, Giorgio Meloni or something like that. you know, is she strong? She hasn't been tested yet. Let's see how she performs under pressure. Which British Prime Minister do we want to talk about? Boris Johnson, you know, he was an idiot. The lady that came after him, Truss, she was an idiot. And of course, this billionaire spoiled playboy, he's an idiot. None of them have the leadership capability of Vladimir Putin. And they don't deserve to be on the same stage as Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, they're not, because Putin's playing a completely different game. These guys are jokes, laughing stocks, idiots, and they're overseeing the destruction of their respective nation. Putin has taken Russia from the ashes, literally from the ashes of the 1990s, and turned it into one of the greatest nations in the world today. And if you're a Russian, you must be damn proud of your leader, damn proud of him, because he has succeeded despite all efforts to bring him down. I wish my leaders had the same moral character, the same intelligence that Vladimir Putin has. That would be a change. But it can't happen, because in America, to become a leader, you have to be a narcissist. And Vladimir Putin is the antithesis of narcissism. Oh, yeah, well, come on, Scotty. He takes his shirt off when he's on vacation. Who the hell doesn't? You know, and who cares? If you're really going to let that photograph bother you, then you're thinking about the wrong things. Anyways, I've gone on too long.
Scott, it seems that he's the toughest man on our planet because he's fighting. The first time after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think is the first time these superpowers are fighting each other, because we didn't have something like that after the collapse of Soviet Union. Not United States. You have Europe, you have South Korea, you have Japan, you have everybody in this battle, and Putin on the opposite side. I would argue even China, even Iran is not totally on the Putin side.
Well, look, I'm somebody who believes that Vladimir Putin is human as the next person. And I believe that behind the scenes, he might get a little angry. He might be, he might display, but he's a leader. And the thing about a leader is, when I was a UN weapons inspector, the chief inspector, I would have to take a team into Iraq, knowing that the mission was going to get us into hot water, knowing that we were going to show up at a facility and soldiers with guns were going to come out, point the guns at us, and we don't carry any weapons. And I had a bunch of scientists and geeks who don't like having guns pointed at them. And I had to bring them and organize them and take them into Iraq and make them believe in the mission. But before I came out to address the team, I'd be in the back by myself, and I was scared to death. I was nervous. This mission scared me. I wasn't sure that we were going to succeed. I'm going through the documents, all that stuff. But all those uncertainties disappear the moment you enter the room. I opened that door and I walked out in front of them, and it was, I am in charge. I am the boss. I am the alpha dog. I am your leader. You will follow me. We're going to win. Let's go. Let's go. And they all went. And that's Vladimir Putin. I'm sure behind closed doors, there's a little bit of thinking and a little bit of worry, because it's a hard problem he's been given. This ain't easy what he's being called upon to do. But being the leader that he is, when that door opens and he walks out and he is the face of Russian leadership, not only to Russian people, but the world, look at the face, calm, collected, no panic. If there's emotion, it's compassion. Compassion is one of the greatest weapons in the world. I wish the United States would learn how to wield it effectively. But in order to be compassionate, you have to be genuine, because people can see through fake compassion. Joe Biden, every time he pretends to be compassionate, he's not. Because again, I come back to what I said earlier. America doesn't care about anything other than America. Whereas Vladimir Putin, I believe, cares about other nations, cares about humanity, cares about people, because he's not bitten by the ego that's bitten America. Putin recognizes how important religion is to Russia and how important the Orthodox religion, the faith, is to Russia. But never once does he say that Russian Orthodoxy is the dominant religion of the world, that Russia is anointed by God to spread Orthodoxy around the world. But in America, we believe that God has blessed us. I mean, after all, at the end of each speech by an American politician, God bless America. And I always am struck by that. What does that mean? Does that mean that God damns everybody else? God blesses us, but damns the rest of the world. That we are the anointed people, everybody else isn't. They are the heathens. That we are the ones that have been, ordered by God, ordained by God to lead the world. The rest of the world is condemned to be followers. That's really what's happening here. I hope people see that. Whereas Vladimir Putin, who openly, speaks about the importance of faith, never once says Russia has been ordained by God to liberate the world. He only speaks of the importance of faith to the Russian people, to the Russian nation. And therefore, that means that he respects other nations. See, we can't respect other nations. We're incapable of respecting other nations because God has only anointed us. God has only blessed us. So how can we respect nations that have not been blessed by God? Whereas Russia believes that they have their faith. But look how he treats Muslim nations. Not as inferiors. He doesn't mock their religion. He treats their religion with respect. He treats every religion with respect. He treats other people with respect. So this is why he's a great man. And one of the reasons, this is the other thing I have to say, he's a great man because the Russians are great people. The Russians are a great people. And more, I hope people come to respect. They're not perfect. Okay, please, anybody watching this, I'm not saying the Russian people are perfect because they're humans. And by definition, we can't be perfect. They are capable of the same foibles, errors, mistakes that all humans make. They're humans. But what makes them different from Americans is their compassion and their humanity. I can guarantee you that if a Russian citizen is walking down the streets of Moscow and they see a homeless person on the street, they are going to do something to help that person, get that person where they need to be to get the assistance. In America, we drive by tent villages and cardboard box villages full of homeless people, and we ignore them. We ignore them. We ignore our own people who need help. What do you think we're going to do to the rest of the world when it needs help? Whereas Russia is genuinely compassionate, and that's because of the Russian people. And if there's one thing I hope to be able to do is to get American people in touch with Russian people so they can have just basic conversations so that we can learn to appreciate them and they can learn about us. Whether they choose to appreciate us, we have to earn that. It can't be given. We can't make anybody appreciate us, but I think we should give them the opportunity to understand us because that's the key. We have to understand one another. Right now in the United States, Russophobia is a disease. Everybody has been infected by it. It's like rabies. We foam at the mouth when we say Russia. They're evil, Putin, evil, documentary, KGB agent, oh, bad. The truth is so much different. The truth is they are compassionate human beings where their basic humanity defines who they are. And once you get to know them and understand them, you could never fear them. It doesn't mean that they can't generate fear. Just ask Germany what happens when you get the Russians mad and they finally, the saying, slow to harness, fast to ride. It takes a while to get the Russians moving. They don't like to get out of their whatever they're doing in their Russian life. They don't want to be messed with. But once you mess with them, once they get up and once they get harnessed, they're off to the races, baby. And just ask the Germans how that worked out. So I'm not sitting here saying that the Russians are incapable of hard decisions and hard actions. They are fully capable of it. But I will say that it will break their heart. And when it's all done, they're more likely to put out a helping hand to help you get back up than they are to put a foot on your throat and keep you down.
In first meeting of Putin with Clinton in this documentary, it shows that Clinton says to his advisors that this guy doesn't seem to want to deal with me, do anything with me. And do you think that what happened during Clinton and Yeltsin was the motive behind this, behind Putin not being not interested to deal with Clinton?
Well, let's remember this. Look, the National Security Archives of the United States has released a declassified phone conversations between Bill Clinton and Boris Yeltsin. And if you read these, it's humiliating for the Russians. Absolutely humiliating. The arrogance that Clinton feels. He pretends to be the friend, but he's not. Yeltsin repeatedly says, I need help, I need help, I need this, I need that. And Clinton's like, well, no, but we need you to do this. And Yeltsin wants to please his American master, so he does that. And he's begging. And the ultimate betrayal was the American decision to bomb Belgrade in 1999. And it's literally humiliating to read the transcript and see just how broken Boris Yeltsin is because of this betrayal by the United States. And it finally comes clear to him that he's been betrayed, that Clinton has been using him. And then I asked people to remind themselves, who was sitting in the room when Yeltsin was making that phone call, being humiliated? And the answer is Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin watched his president, the leader of his nation, be humiliated by the American leadership. So going forward, the message Tillerson isn't that willing to do business with him. It's that Tillerson hadn't earned the right and privilege to do business with Putin. Americans have to get over there. Just because show up doesn't mean that Putin has to play Yeltsin and bow down and bring you in. Putin will, of course, bring you in. You're the United States of America. You get your audience. But at that point, you have to earn it. You have to put something on the table that is worthy of interaction. Putin's not going to sit there and just be dictated to. It must be part of a negotiation. And to start that negotiation, you have to put something real on the table. And neither the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, or the Trump administration ever put anything on the table worthy of discussion. It was all about furthering the same sort of American dominance that existed under Boris Yeltsin and the expectation that Russia would accept a subservient role. And Putin said, no, we are equals. We're not trying to say we're superior to the United States, but we are your equals. And you have to treat us as equals, or else I really don't want to do business with you. And, a lot of Americans call this arrogance. I called it being a good Russian leader. If you want to do business with Putin, put something on the table worthy of discussion. It has to be something that isn't singularly beneficial to the United States. In arms control, for instance, I'm a big proponent of arms control. But why would Russia ever enter into a treaty with the United States again? We've lied on every treaty. We've withdrawn from treaties that become inconvenient. And when we negotiate treaties, we're seeking singular advantage. We want to negotiate an outcome that gives us an advantage, keeps the Russians down. That's our approach. So if I were the Russians, I would never sit at the table with the United States until they change their approach. If the United States wants an arms control agreement with Russia, we have to respect Russia's legitimate national security concerns, treat them as legitimate, and then be willing to compromise so that we both get what we're looking for equally, mutually, that nobody gets an advantage. That's the purpose of arms control, is to level the playing field so that we're both on the same page, so nobody feels threatened, so that we're encouraged to pursue disarmament, to get rid of nuclear weapons so the world doesn't die in a nuclear holocaust in the morning. But what we want is to negotiate a treaty that allows us to cheat, which we have done in New START. We negotiated a treaty leading the Russians to believe that would bring nuclear numbers down here. And then because of language loopholes that we created, we say, oh no, we can, and suddenly we have thousands of warheads that are, no longer accountable out there that can be immediately brought back in. The Russians are going, guys, that's not the purpose of the treaty. The purpose of the treaty wasn't so that you could find loopholes to get an advantage over us. The purpose of the treaty was we're supposed to be equal. How can we ever trust you again? Because the Americans go, no, that's what we negotiated. We never said there had to be this verification and that compliance and this. We simply said this would happen, and then this theoretical thing could happen, but now we've made it real, and we have thousands of warheads that aren't accountable. And the Russians are like, why would we want to do business with you? You say you want to negotiate a new treaty. Why would we do that? You're liars. You're deceivers. This isn't good for Russia. So Russia's not going to do it. And we got to find a way to change the way America thinks. And the first thing we have to do is get the American people not to be afraid of the Russian people. If the American people aren't afraid of the Russian people, then they won't tolerate these kind of policies. The only reason why our policymakers get away with these policies is that the American people are fearful of the Russian people. We're afraid of Russia. Therefore, we feel we need these policies. It's got to be about the total re-education of the United States of America when it comes to Russia.
But it seems to me that with these, we had neocons after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and now they're joined by neoliberals. They're all against Russia. I don't see anything in. How do you see this? Is it gonna change in near future, or it's gonna take much longer time to take place? This relation, this you are talking about the relation between Americans, people, ordinary people, Americans and Russians. But is it possible with this political system that exists in the United States?
Not as it's currently configured. It's not possible. I mean, America's fundamentally broken. We're fundamentally broken, both domestically and in terms of our relations with the world. And we have to find a way to fix it. And in any case, we're talking about generational changes. Let me make it clear. There's very few people of my generation who have good feelings towards Russia, because I was among the very few who actually traveled there, met Russians, and helped understanding based upon reality, not fiction. Most people grew up during the Cold War, didn't interact with the Russians, and then in that brief moment in the 90s where the walls came down, we treated the Russians as a defeated enemy. And we had expectations that Russians would always be subservient, always be at the beck and call of America, dependent upon America. And we liked that. We liked feeling good about ourselves, going into Russia like the big American and looking at the pathetic Russians. And yes, capitalism will cure everything, we told them. Just trust capitalism. But meanwhile, sell us all your resources at very low prices. Well, you want a living wage? You don't need a living wage. You're Russians after all. You know how to suffer in silence. Meanwhile, we'll get rich off of your wealth and all this stuff. If that's how you dealt with Russia, then you don't know anything about Russia. And when Russia decided to stand back up on its feet, you became resentful of Russia. And that resentment led to isolation. And from isolation, ignorance is born. And from ignorance comes fear. And that's what feeds Russophobia. So today we have an America that is thoroughly isolated from the reality of Russia. We are fearful of Russia because we've been told to be afraid. We're ignorant of everything about Russia, and therefore nothing's going to change, because from our ignorance-based fear, politicians make policies that say, we will protect you from the Russians. So we need more nuclear weapons. We need to build up NATO. We need to do all this. And all the Americans go, yes, please, protect us from the evil Russians, from that Vladimir Putin, that KGB man. I saw the documentary. He's evil. And we got to change this. And one thing I've learned about people my age and even a couple generations, once we get set in our ways, we don't change. We don't change. Most of these people who hate Russia will go to their deathbeds hating Russia because they're just stupid and ignorant, and they really don't care. They don't want to learn. That takes too much effort. We got to skip a generation, and we got to get down to the children. And we got to get the children to start working, because that's the generation that could make a change. They haven't been polluted or corrupted yet by narcissistic politicians. Let them formulate their own things. And so, I'm hopeful of creating a network of dialogue where, my working term is Moms That Matter, MTM. And I want to create a network of moms that matter in Russia and the United States. And the reason why moms matter is that the moms care about their children. They love their children. And so the mom that matters in Russia will pick up the phone to a mom that matters in America, and their children will talk, and their children will become friends. You know, we don't need to do pen pals anymore. We got FaceTime. We got video chat. So these Russians can look at their Americans and they can see, and their children, and children are amazing, and children will learn to love and have compassion and feel, and they'll talk to people. So when someone says they're evil, they say, no, I just talk. They're not evil. They like the same things I like. We'll talk about music. We'll talk about culture. We'll talk about literature. We'll just talk about playing. We'll talk about living. And once you do that, as they grow older, they'll realize that that extends into adulthood, and the respect and the compassion and the humanity that's shared there will lead to good policy. Good policy. We can't make good policy overnight. It's going to take some time, but we can focus on in the short term is making sure we don't kill ourselves in the process of the transition. And the way we're going to kill ourselves is nuclear war. So we got to fight for arms control. There's a lot of Russians that take umbrage when you say disarmament, because they say, we don't trust you. We're not going to disarm. Okay, but what if we agree not to build more weapons? What if we agree to have inspectors go in so that we have confidence that neither side's trying to get an advantage? What if we at least stabilize our nuclear forces so that we know what we have, and therefore we're not afraid, we're not seeking advantage, it's stable, it's calm. Okay, we're not asking you to disarm yet because you don't trust us. We haven't earned your trust. But let's stop the arms race. Let's bring it under control. Let's calm things down. Let's buy time so that Sasha and Joseph can learn to talk to each other on the phone, have a conversation, recognize mutual humanity, and give them a chance to grow up and let them change the world the way they want to change it. But let's keep the world alive. Let's keep it here. Let's keep it functioning. I don't know. That maybe it's naive, but that's what I think should be happening.
I think we finally have to get to this point. It's our ultimate goal, Scott. But in this documentary, it's after Clinton, Bush came along. Putin was seeing something in Bush. He was willing to work with him. But after 2003, when Iraq war, United States decided to go to Iraq just to liberate Iraqis, just to spread democracy. They're saying even Bush says we are fighting democracy's fight. And after that, he said, we are eager to spread democracy to Georgia, to Ukraine. Do you think it was the breaking point in the relations of Putin and George W. Bush?
I think there's something else, another dynamic, and I'll call it Chechnya. Putin has alluded to it several times. In America, we don't talk about it. But the role played by the United States in creating the Chechen conflict and then sustaining the Chechen conflict and trying to use the Chechen conflict as a mechanism of dismembering Russia. You see, if we could create a crisis in Chechnya that caused the Chechen Republic to become independent of Russia, we have now created a template that can be repeated in Udmurtia, Bashkiria, the Tartar Republic, maybe Buryat, maybe others. We could cause Russia to break apart. That was the goal and objective, because we don't want Russia, this big, large expanse, to have all of the resources that they have. You know, Russia is a nation that is truly blessed by natural resources. And if Russia ever truly masters these resources, not only will it be a very wealthy nation in its own right, but it will be able to leverage that around the world, not just their energy, but other mineral resources. We're afraid of that. We fear this. What we want to do is break Russia up into component parts, none of which can ever rise up to challenge us, and all of which can be dominated by us so that we can gain access to their mineral wealth on terms that benefit us. Remember, America is a nation of what, 340 million people? When you compare that to what's the population of the world now, over 7 billion, coming close to 8 billion. So we are literally this much of the world's population, but we consume 20+% of the world's resources. How does that work? We don't own all those resources. We have to go out and get those resources. How do we do that? Do we do it by being your friend? Or we do it through an empire colonial relationship where we treat you as servants of America? See, we want Russia to be a perpetual colony and the various Russian components to be colonies of America, where we get their resources and then we throw some bones at them to keep them happy, but they'll never be strong. And Putin says no. And Putin has alluded to that, conversations he had with Bill Clinton about wanting to join NATO. And he, when he talked about that, and Clinton said, he said, of course he rejected me because of Chechnya. We know what they were doing in Chechnya. And remember, the Chechen conflict continued up until 2005. And who was the president of the United States during this time? Yeah. George W. Bush. So be careful reading Western narratives, because the idea that Putin took the measurement, that comes from Bush. Bush is the one who said, I stared into his eyes and I saw his soul. Putin was staring into Bush's eyes, probably saying, you're a lying sack of manure, wanting to be my friend. But I know what you're doing. I know what your CIA is doing. We're not stupid. We know what your plans are. How can you sit here and talk to me about being friends when we know you're conspiring behind our backs to rip our country apart? But Putin also knew that Russia at that point in time was weak, couldn't stand up to America totally on its own, had to play the game. And so that's what Putin was doing. He was buying time. He never surrendered, but he never fully declared it because he can't. He had to keep the oligarchs around, the oligarchs who were stealing from Russia, enriching themselves, putting that money in Western banks and bringing them with business. He had to allow the business to exist in Moscow at terms that were unfavorable to Russia because he wasn't strong enough to declare independence. The Russian military was a joke when Putin came in. He had to rebuild the Russian military, rebuild Russian industry, rebuild Russia. The decade of 1990s, it collapsed Russia. Putin had to bring it back up. It takes time. But gradually you saw Putin remind people of the realities that they were dealing with. 2005, April, before the Russian Federation, speaking of the collapse of the Soviet Union being one of the greatest tragedies of the last century. Why? Because millions of Russians, or tens of millions of Russians overnight became homeless, stateless. And as the Russian leader, he can't allow that. He let the world know, I'm going to take care of the Russian people, the Russian nation. 2007, the Munich Security Conference, he put the world on notice that they no longer get to dictate. Who are they to dictate? Do you not know what you did in Iraq, he told them. Do you not understand the consequences of your actions? But clearly the West didn't. And on and on and on, Putin spoke, told the world what he planned on doing, what he saw, how he was going to respond to that. He was honest the whole time. So this notion that, Putin was betrayed by the West. I don't think Putin was betrayed by the West because the West was always betraying Putin. How can you betray somebody when the status quo is betrayal? Betrayal means that you're putting out some false hope and then you do something different. I don't think Putin ever bought into the lies and the false promises he was being told by the West. I think he always knew from day one that this moment in time would come where Russia would have to divorce itself from the West. But Russia couldn't do that early on. Russia had to stand on its own 2 feet. And I actually think that Putin was still hesitant when to Ukraine. He wasn't confident in his ability to And in many ways, he was the debt of gratitude because the West helped make the very difficult decision of an absolute divorce with Russia because the West did it. Russia didn't ask for the divorce. The West gave Russia the divorce. One of the best gifts the West could ever have given. The same thing. How did Putin get rid of the oligarchs? They were always this burden on him, this lecherous, leeching scum that stole from the Russian people, but you couldn't get rid of them because they were so powerful. They had their tentacles everywhere. And then the West stole all their money and weakened them. And Putin said, out, cast them out like Jesus cast out the money collectors from the temple. Out, be out with you. And now Russia has been purged of the West. And look, did it collapse? No. Is it a little difficult? Sure. But they're alive. They're living. They're independent. They're not beholden to anybody. And things are going to get better. It's the best gift the West could give to Putin. Liberation, independence.
And Scott, when we see the war that happened in Iraq, the allegation of the United States, they were telling that weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, all those things, all those lies, to go after this Saddam Hussein, to bring him down. And this is the same Saddam Hussein they supported 8 years during Iran-Iraq war. The
Yep.
same set of countries, Germany, France, United States, Great Britain, helped Saddam to fight Iran. And they gave them chemical weapons to use against Iranians. It's so amazing. It, all of the sudden, they decided now Saddam Hussein turned a bad guy. He has weapons. He has I don't chemical weapons. We want to destroy them. But how do you see these events? How do you see this hypocrisy when they go after, when they support him and they go after him to bring him down?
Well, the in the 1980s, the United States had was dealing primarily with Iran. And, we had the Iranian Revolution in 79, the Shah, which kicked out, close ally. And then this theocracy comes in, and one of the first things that happens under theocracy is that the American embassy is taken over, and Americans are held hostage for 444 days. If you're not an American, you don't understand what that meant. We were a nation already suffering from the shock of the Vietnam War. We were suffering from the shock of economic malaise. Jimmy Carter putting on his sweater, turning down the thermostat, telling Americans, and Americans don't like to be in a state of malaise because we're Americans. We have the American dream. We need 2 cars in our garages. We need the big house. We need a job. We need vacations. We need money. We need privilege. That's America. And we're being shocked. We're not invincible. We lost in Vietnam. Our economy is not thriving. There's unemployment. There's racism. There's problems. And then in the midst of this, while we're trying to revive a sense of American patriotism, this is right during the re-election bid of Jimmy Carter when Ronald Reagan, this arch conservative, is trying to breathe new life into the notion of the shining city on the hill. And America is this great land of hope, freedom, and patriotism is being reborn. And in the midst of that, they take Americans hostage. And we will never forgive Iran for that. I don't want to hear anything from the Iranians about, well, America supported the Shah. What? I don't care. I don't care. Took my citizens hostage, and you for 4 days. And you want to know really hate the Iranians? Because when we went in to try and rescue them, and the helicopter crashed in the airplane, we had to abandon 8 bodies. Your mullahs poked at those bodies with knives and mocked them, mocked our dead service members. Unforgivable act in the eyes of Americans. I don't want to hear anything from any Iranian about this. We don't care about you. We don't care about you. Your opinion doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is our opinion. You humiliated us. You mocked, and we will give you. That's just the way it is. And so their attitude towards you. And so here comes Saddam Hussein. We can't say we like, but his troops are killing Iranians. And that's a good thing. So we supported him, a little hypocritically, because we also supported Iran to kill Iraqis. We thought it was a good idea. As long as these brown people are killing these brown people, that's good. But of the 2 brown people, we like the Iraqi brown people better because they didn't take our people hostage. They didn't humiliate us. So we supported Iraq. We sent in intelligence teams over to Iraq to work with their military to plan operations. We allowed money to be made available so that Iraq could procure the capabilities abroad to build chemical weapons, long-range missiles. And we helped Iraq win the war. And that was a good thing from an American perspective because we taught the Iranians a lesson. We taught the Iranians a lesson. But the problem now is we had Saddam. And Saddam wasn't willing just to say, okay, thank you, now I'm going to go away. Saddam emerged from the war saying, I'm a regional superpower. And the whole Arab world is now looking to me. And so I'm going to stand up to Israel. And the Israelis at the time were talking about maybe striking the Kuwait nuclear plant because they believed that Iraq was pursuing a nuclear weapons program. They were. But the Iraqis said, if you bomb this plant like you did in 1982, the Osirak reactor, we're going to retaliate. We have these missiles now that broke the spirit of Iran, the Al-Hussein missile, and Iraq said we've tapped them with tipped them with the dual-use chemical, and we'll burn all of Israel if you attack us, retaliatory weapon. They started to act on it, building these launchers in Western Iraq that were oriented towards Israel. And the Israelis were telling the Americans, whoa, 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 control your dog. This dog that you built, he's barking right now and he's growling. Control him. So we're telling the Iraqis, hey, calm down, chill out. Don't threaten the Israelis because we're Israeli, we're the allies, da, da, da. And then we needed to put Saddam in his place. So now come the Kuwaitis. During the war with Iraq, Kuwait loaned, war with Iran, Kuwait loaned Iraq billions of dollars. I forget how much, that was $40 billion. Meanwhile, Kuwait is slant drilling into Iraqi oil and stealing billions of dollars of Iraqi oil. And then we encouraged them to dump that oil on the market to suppress the price of oil. Saddam borrowed a lot of money to build his military. Now he's deeply in debt. And the London banks were saying, pay the debt. And so our goal, using the Kuwaitis, was to collapse the oil market so that oil, I think Iraq needed the oil to be hovering around $14 a barrel. Imagine that. But, and we were suppressing it to 12, 10, and Iraq wasn't earning enough money, couldn't pay their debt, and they warned everybody, said, this is economic warfare. This is going to ruin us. And they turned to the Kuwait and said, you got to stop. And Kuwait turned to us and we went, don't worry about it. We got your back. We don't. Again, America's the friend of nobody. But so the Kuwaitis continued not to provide the loans, continued to slant drill. Iraq then around and made a non-aggression treaty with everybody. The Saudis, all the Arab countries, the Turks, everybody. They said, non-aggression, we won't attack you. The one nation they didn't make a non-aggression treaty with was Kuwait. And in the United States, we said, well, I guess Iraq is going to launch a punitive attack. And if they limit this attack to the oil fields on the border, to take control of the oil fields that are slant drilling, stealing their oil, and maybe Bubiyan Island, which is a strategic island in the mouth of the Shatt al-Arab that helps guarantee Iraqi access to the Persian Gulf, then that's okay. And we'll just tell the Kuwaitis, so sad, too bad, you gambled, you lost. The Iraqis launched the attack, but instead of limiting the attack, they went straight for the kill. Boom. And now we have a problem because Iraq has suddenly taken over not only the Kuwaiti oil fields, which are significant, but they're in a position to threaten the eastern Saudi Arabian oil fields. And almost overnight, Iraq had used its military power to leverage itself in a position to dominate the global oil market, and we did that. We already had somebody dominate the global oil market, and that was Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, their fields, and so they were like the gas. If we need gas prices to go up, we tell the Saudis to take their foot off the gas and lower the production. The prices raise. Now we need prices to go down. Put your pedal to the metal, increase that production, lower the prices. So the Saudis were our little whipping boys. They did whatever we wanted them to do under the promise that we would protect them. Now Saudi Arabia is screaming, oh my God, Iraq came in, took Kuwait, and they're threatening our oil fields. And we said, okay, now we have to intervene. But here's the problem. Everything I just described means that the war was going to be about oil. Yeah, we could go to the Security Council. We could cite Iraq's violation of of the UN Charter that they invaded. Article 51, self-defense comes in. We could explain all this. But now how do you explain to the American people that you're going to send hundreds of thousands of their soldiers off to fight and die in a war for oil, especially a war where we're going up against Saddam Hussein, and we have photographs of Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein's our friend. It was literally just less than 2 years ago when we had American intelligence officers helping them target Iranian positions on Al-Fal Peninsula, knowing they're going to use chemical weapons. But now we have to go to war. So George Bush did what every American president does. He shapes perception. And in Dallas, speaking at a Republican fundraiser in October, he gave a speech where he basically said that Saddam Hussein was the Middle East equivalent of Adolf Hitler. And for the crime of invading and occupying Kuwait, there had to be Nuremberg-like retribution. Once a American president says that, you can't back away from that. You can't call somebody Hitler and then say, well, he's not Hitler. You can't promise retribution and say, no, we weren't serious about that. It's a political trap built by the Americans themselves. We stepped into it, and now we're trapped by it. So when the Gulf War ended, even though we defeated Iraq, kicked them out of Kuwait, Saddam's still in power, which means President Bush has a problem. Hitler's still in power. And so we now have to spend the next decades trying to come up with the means of getting rid of Saddam. We tried using sanctions. Those sanctions had to be linked to something to excuse that. Originally, the sanctions were linked to Iraq's occupation of Kuwait, but now that Kuwait had been liberated, we need a new reason for sanctions. That was weapons of mass destruction. We invented it, the problem, to justify sanctions. And now we have to disarm Iraq. But if we successfully disarm Iraq, that means sanctions will be lifted. So the American policy was to never allow Iraq to be successfully disarmed. So even as the inspectors were disarming, we had to prevent them from disarming, interfere with the inspections to maintain the perception that Iraq was non-compliant, keep the sanctions in place. And then as the sanctions on in Iraq, we then had to get the CIA to try to remove him through assassination, through coup d'etat. The United States became regime change policy in 1990. And from that moment on, it was just, we needed the right set of to justify going to war. And those circumstances came on September 11th, 2001, which was attacked by terrorists. And people say, but none of those terrorists were Iraqis. It doesn't matter. Remember, one of the basic fundamental principles of America, the American people are idiots. They are stupid. They are literally sheep waiting to be led. And so we know that the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11 had nothing to do with Iraq. The American people, because of their ignorance of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, the same level of ignorance that exists, by the way, regarding Putin in Russia, which is why this is very dangerous, this ignorance. We were told that Saddam Hussein was in cahoots with Osama bin Laden, and that the danger we were facing was the nexus between these terrorists who attacked America and these weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And if they came together, these weapons of mass destruction made in the hands of the terrorists, the next 9/11, which we were told is going to happen, will involve weapons of mass destruction and millions of Americans must die. Therefore, we must invade Iraq and get rid of Saddam Hussein because he is evil. But we were invading Iraq to get rid of Saddam Hussein because George W. Bush's papa called him Hitler. George W. Bush was going to finish and get rid of Papa's problem, not because Iraq posed a threat, but that Saddam Hussein's continued survival was a political embarrassment. That's right. We went to war because the president was embarrassed, and we slaughtered millions of people because of that. If there's a reason for people to hate America, I just gave it to you.
And Scott, in this documentary, when it goes to the to capturing of Crimea by Putin, it doesn't explain anything about what happened in 2014 in Ukraine, that coup that has happened there. Why they're not mentioning what happened in 2014 in Ukraine, which is the key to capturing the Crimea.
First of all, Russia didn't capture the Crimea. You can't capture that which is yours. I mean, the vast majority of the people in Crimea view themselves as Russians. Russia liberated Crimea. Let's just get the terminology correct here. To capture it means that you're taking away from people that don't want it. They're going to resist you. The vast majority of the people there were like, thank you. You're liberating us. So we have to get the terminology correct. And why did they feel they had to be liberated? Because of the events in the Maidan, the rise of this right-wing ultranationalism, neo-Nazi derived government that declared war on ethnic Russians, literally declared war on ethnic Russians. In April, they passed a resolution basically labeling all ethnic Russians as terrorists, authorizing the Ukrainian military to engage in a counterterrorism operation against ethnic Russians. So now Russia liberated the Russians from the Ukrainian tyranny. That's the reality. But they can't say that because in the end, look, the truth will out. I just firmly believe that. Look at all the lies that were told about weapons of mass destruction. All the lies that continue to be told about weapons of mass destruction. But how many people in the world today believe that? How many people go, oh, yeah, because America says there are weapons of mass destruction. I think the vast majority of people in the world said, you lied. You went to war on a lie. The truth will out. Right now, we have a government, Ukraine, that needs to maintain the fiction that what happened in the Maidan in Kiev wasn't a coup, but a righteous revolution against the tyranny of Viktor Yanukovych, and they freed themselves of the Russian yoke. And these are not right-wing neo-Nazis, these are legitimate Ukrainian patriots. And the Russians were evil because Putin, remember, Putin's that KGB guy, and he came in and he got the Russians to rise up against us, and we had no choice but to do this, and it's all Putin's fault. That's all a lie. Now, someday in the not too distant future, the Ukrainian government is going to be destroyed, defeated, eliminated. And at that time, the world is going to come into possession of documentary evidence and confessions, because there's going to be trials. And the truth of what happened in 2014 will emerge, just like the truth of weapons of mass destruction emerged. Now, you're not going to get the United States to admit that it did wrong because, of course, we are anointed by God. We can do no wrong. Therefore, we should admit nothing. But the rest of the world, even those who are supporting Ukraine today, are going to be confronted with an overwhelming body of fact-based data that proves that this was one of the most evil governments ever seen on the planet since Adolf Hitler's time. What they're doing to their own people, the lawlessness, creating incidents like Bucha and then you have Ukrainian officials openly bragging about killing thousands of people. You're going to have to do a census to find out how many people we killed because we just kill them. We don't care. We bring them in, we shoot them, we dump their body. This is all of Ukraine. This is how the Ukrainian officials act. This is how they operate. They're at war with their own people. And the Americans tolerate this. The truth of this will come out.
When I was talking with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, he thought that Biden gonna be a better president than Trump when he came along. But when we see what happened after the Crimea, after the capture of the Crimea by Putin, Biden suggesting Obama a tough response by sending weapons to Ukraine. In those days, he was always thinking the same way. At that, now what he did the same thing that he offered Obama to do. Obama wasn't willing to do this. He was telling Biden that this thing, Ukraine doesn't matter to Americans. It's not top priority for our elections. But we see when he get in the office, Biden, he did the same thing he offered Obama in those days.
Look, Biden has been central to the policy of regime change that the United States has embarked on regarding Vladimir Putin, to remove Putin from power. And one of the key aspects of this regime change policy is to create the conditions inside Russia, especially in Moscow, for a Maidan-type insurrection. That's Biden's goal and objective. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. And Obama doesn't get a clean bill of health because Obama's the one that approved the Russian reset, which was nothing more than a farce. It was regime change, the regime change wolf wrapped in the Russian reset sheep's clothing. We were trying to be something, but we were really just trying to keep Vladimir Putin out of office and make Dmitry Medvedev the modern day incarnation of Boris Yeltsin. Joe Biden is a lying sack of horse manure. Joe Biden is not the smartest man in the room. He is literally the dumbest man in the room. So people have to be careful when they impart, deep thought into Biden's action. Joe Biden allowed a circumstance to exist while he was the policy czar that created the perception that his son was using the Biden name to make millions of dollars in Ukraine, and that Joe Biden was somehow benefiting from this. And once you have that kind of corruption embedded in the policy, you can't trust anything that ever happened after that, because you have to come away with the understanding that everything that happened in Ukraine was designed to create conditions that made Joe Biden or his son or both even wealthier. This whole Burisma thing just stinks. It's horrible. We now have some concern about, I forget, was it FTX? This cryptocurrency scam turns out to be nothing more than a giant money laundering scheme. To send money there, then that money gets sent back as donations and the political parties. This is corruption of a scale. Now, we expect it from Ukraine, but it's infected the United States as well. And Joe Biden is the man who's been most infected. You got to see him for what he is. This is not a man who cares about America. This is a man who cares only about Joe Biden. That's it. This is all about the benefit of Joe Biden. And it's disgusting. Disgusting. I'm not saying that Donald Trump was any better, but for Donald Trump, he was a narcissist just like Biden is. But because he wasn't, Donald Trump made his money exploiting American tax loopholes, exploiting business development, property development, etc. He didn't make his money putting national security at risk by, subordinating American security policy to a system of corruption designed to enrich himself and enrich his son. You can say whatever you want about Donald Trump. Most of it's probably true, but he didn't do that.
And final question, Scott. How do you see this battle going in January, February? Is it going to have how do you see these tanks that United States and Germany they're going to send to Ukraine? How they gonna work for Ukraine?
The tanks are mobile coffins. I mean, let's just talk numbers. The British Challenger, 14. Does anybody understand what the frontage of a tank company on the attack is? It's not much. Kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers. That's your frontage. It's thousands of kilometers. So suddenly you're going to tell me that Ukraine's going to win the war because they can put 14 tanks on a 2-kilometer frontage in advance against an army that's defending in depth that has been equipped with weapons designed to kill a Challenger 2 tank. So even if the Challenger 2 tank does penetrate the first line of defense, the second line of defense is going to stop it, fix it, kill it. And all 14 tanks will be destroyed quick. Everybody in them will be dead. 14 tanks. Oh, wait, the Germans are sending 14 Leopard 2. Same scenario. Just because it's a Leopard 2 doesn't mean it's suddenly magically imbued with powers that make it immortal and can do whatever it wants. 2-kilometer frontage. That's it. 2 kilometers against a prepared Russian defense. They're going to all be dead within a matter of hours once they get committed. 30 Abrams. That's, I'm just basic Marine math. That's a little bit more than 2 times. So now we're talking 5-kilometer frontage, maybe 7-kilometer frontage. That's it. and they attack against a prepared defense, they'll all be destroyed. These tanks mean nothing. They literally mean nothing. Every Ukrainian being trained to operate these tanks is dead man walking. Oh, maybe they'll fire off a couple rounds. Maybe they'll hit a Russian tank. Maybe they'll kill some Russians. Of course they will. It's war. Things happen, but they're not going to win. How do I see things happening? Russia is going to roll over the Ukrainians, steamroll them. I see nothing but dead Ukrainians. That line from Sixth Sense, I see dead people. Oh, I see dead people too. They all have the Ukrainian flag on their shoulder. They're all dead because they tried to fight against the Russian military machine that has woken up. We talked about it earlier. Slow to harness, fast to ride. Hey guys, the Russian military has been harnessed and they're getting ready to go on a ride, and there's nothing that's going to stop them. Nothing.
It seems by sending these weapons, this money to Ukraine, they're suffering. They're not defending themselves. They're dying and suffering. How do you see any talks coming along about the peace in Ukraine?
Why would Russia talk? And to whom? Who can Russia trust? The only talks that are going to take place in Ukraine is the terms of surrender that Russia is going to dictate to a new Ukrainian government that replaces the failed Ukrainian government of Zelensky. It's tragic, but Ukraine has lost the right for a negotiated settlement. The tragedy is that Ukraine will be destroyed as a modern nation state, something I warned about early on. And unfortunately, it's going to happen, not because Russia wants it to happen, because the West made it happen by committing resources into Ukraine to sustain this fight because they don't care about Ukraine. Remember Lindsey Graham, we are going to fight to the last dead Ukrainian. Well, good job, Ukraine. You allowed Lindsey Graham to be shown to be accurate. I mean, I'm sorry for the Ukrainian people. I really am. But at some point in time, they have to step up and take responsibility for their own actions. And for Ukrainians who have been complacent and silent, silence is consent. If you're not fighting against Zelensky, then you're supporting Zelensky. And that's where we're at today. I can forgive people early on because it wasn't stark. But by now, if it's not apparent to everybody that this man is destroying your country, this man is killing your people, this man doesn't care about you. This man only cares about himself. And the people around him are all corrupt, who only care about using this money to enrich their pockets, to pad their bank accounts, and at the appropriate time, they will flee, leaving the rest of the Ukrainian people there to pay the consequences of their crimes. If you're an Ukrainian and you don't see that right now, then you're blind.
It's so tragic.